Great. So yes, if you're just joining now, my name's Sthiramanas, and I'm really pleased to have Prajnaketu here with us. Prajnaketu's normally based in Oxford and has journeyed here on this dark winter night to talk to us about his new book, Cyberloka, Buddhist Guide to Digital Life, which we'll have a lot more to say about in a moment. I'll just say just something. I'll just introduce Prajnaketu slightly more fully. So Prajnaketu was ordained in 2014, which was where he was given a caser like this that represents a decisive commitment to Buddhist practice, and was given the name Prajnaketu, which means he who holds a lamp of wisdom. I believe that's right. Yeah. And we've known each other for a little while, and in a way, there's a particular shared interest on this, because we've both been sort of separately interested in this area of how we practice Buddhism in relation to the fact that we've all got phones in our pockets that we keep looking at, and so much of our life is mediated through that. That's something the Buddha really didn't have anything specific to say about. And we have quite an active translation to do to relate the Buddha's teachings to this particular world. So myself and a couple of others created a new course called Upgrade Your Mind, which we ran here in the spring, and we're going to run again next year. So I've been trying to think about it in that context, and Prajnaketu meanwhile has been writing this book. So it's been a real pleasure to be able to talk about it at a couple of occasions. And just recently, just over the last couple of weeks, I've been on retreat and got back and have sort of been cramming for this. But otherwise, just joyfully reading through it, and I've just thoroughly enjoyed it. There'll be a chance to buy the book at the end. We've got lots of copies, and Prajnaketu will kindly sign some. But mainly, I just want to start with a really hearty recommendation for it. I picked it up and thought, oh, it's quite small. I read the first page and thought, oh, it's funny and it's very personal, and sort of expected it to sort of be a romp, and it kind of was. But it's also very dense with thinking as well. It's very in a very accessible way, but it's clearly the fruit of a lot of reflection on how to bring these two worlds together, Buddhist thought and our screen-mediated world. So I just want to really congratulate you on that. And maybe we could start by just hearing a little bit more about you. So many people here won't have met you before. So maybe just you could say a little bit about your journey into Buddhist practice and your life.
Yeah. Okay. So I started fairly early. Not with Buddhism. I was a Christian at the time, and I sort of got into Buddhism through meditation. That's my main way. And I was doing a work experience placement in an aircraft factory somewhere between Southampton and Portsmouth, as you do. And I was 15, and it was completely alien environment from what I'd grown up in a very kind of prim, middle class, Christian kind of context. And the other men, because it was almost all men working in this factory, were very different, of a very different background. The banter was like what I've never heard. I'd never heard adults say, before. I'd sort of heard it in playgrounds, but never in adult company. Anyway, at one point, I remember just coming around a corner in the stores area and overhearing some of these men talking about meditation, and I thought, oh gosh, it's kind of interesting that these men were interested in that. And I thought, well, if they can do it, then why not me? So I've got a book. In fact, it was about a year later, I sort of worked up the courage. I got a book. I learned how to meditate, and then gradually found my way into Buddhism. That involved decoupling from Christianity, and then eventually coming across a Sthiramanas Buddhist Centre back in 2009.
Yeah. And then that's quite a step to then get to the point where you'd want to, for example, change your name and really commit yourself to it. Was there? Can you remember a sense of a moment where you realised that was what you wanted to do, that you wanted to take this very seriously in your life?
Yeah, I think it was a point where I actually met a member of the order. So it was a man called Ratnaprabha, whom some of you know, and what I experienced in encountering Ratnaprabha was here's a man who is obviously very intelligent, kind of culturally of a similar background to me. He's got a sense of humour. He's not a kind of pious monk. All of that appealed to me. He's in a romantic relationship. Great. Yes, I can see that there was a path for me to follow in Buddhism at that point. I thought, I want some of what this guy has. Yeah.
Great. And meanwhile, I know from reading the book, you were through growing up, you were also having this sort of parallel exploration that you probably we're learning now through reflecting back on it, of growing up in a world where the internet was more and more prevalent, and you were sort of exploring that in different ways. Can you think? Was there a moment where you particularly started to think about Buddhism and these issues in the same breath, if you like, or was that much more of a recent development?
Yeah, I think that's actually quite recent. So I'm quite old. I'm early middle age, I think is what I describe myself as. A tender 37. And so when I was when I was growing up, so I started meditating when I was 16. It's like we're in the full swing of Web 1.0. So it's just long pages of text, GIFs. I think GIFs existed at that point. It was people using SMS text and that kind of thing. If you remember phones with buttons, like that was the world that I was encountering as I was learning to meditate. And so right from the kind of the word go, there was this kind of parallel experience going on. So on the one hand, I was actually just getting very confused with what I was reading online about all these different kinds of spiritual traditions. And on the other hand, meditating. And on one hand, I was, particularly as video started to become more of a thing on the internet, getting taken away by that. I went through a period of addiction to pornography as well, which we can talk about. And then at the same time, I'm going to the Buddhist centre and sort of trying to be spiritual. And so there has been this kind of tension right the way through my involvement with meditation and Buddhism and the kind of developing world of digital technology, and they've been in tension. And I think for me that's one of the sort of motives to write, is recognising that inside of myself there is this seemingly irreconcilable tension that I need to resolve, I need to work out. And this book in a way is the it's the first step, almost the first step actually in my attempt to do that. It's not a finished article by any means.
When you say an irresolvable tension, what would that be between?
Well, distraction. So just sort of feeling like, you sort of read these comment threads on Facebook or whatever, and it's like you read the first 2.5 words and then you move on to the next comment, and just feeling like my attention is on the one hand like being sort of filed away, or even like gnawed away. My capacity to attend is being gnawed away, and yet I do have this really strong aspiration to the kind of mind that the Buddha had. That's that sort of capacity to be fully present and fully aware. So that's that sort of more.
I think that's the situation all of us find ourselves in, really. And one of the things I most enjoyed doing this course was just meeting lots of people and talking to them about this area of their lives, and this sense of an aspiration towards something a mind that is much richer, and a kind of tendency to then keep going back to flipping through trivia and watching nonsense videos, and the sort of the tension between the two, and really noticing how like upset with themselves people could get about that, because you've got this ideal, and you can sit here and meditate and feel very genuinely very inspired, and then at another time, as you're saying, I think it's this same tension, at another time find yourself just sort of stuck in a wormhole. how can one sort of how can we start to relate to that tension, do you think?
Well, I think by virtue of the fact you are here, probably there is an element of that going on. So I mean, there might be people here who don't have a smartphone. I don't know, but certainly, we do inhabit, probably in most of our works, we inhabit that kind of world, or that's the world that our work takes place in, often with screens. And we're coming here and we're trying to meditate. So it's like, I do think there's an important almost cultivation of that tension. So recognizing, there is this side of me which kind of wants to engage with digital technology because it's so compelling, and even because it's beneficial, actually. And I think that's sort of where I end up going with the book. And also, there is this other pull in another direction. It seems important to me that we don't kind of compartmentalise. So we come to the shrine and we turn off our phone, or I give my phone to my Trashura, or whatever. So not because of any sort of lack of self-control on my part, but I give my phone to my Trashura, and how do we bring those sides of ourselves into conversation, into a helpful conversation, rather than just flipping from one extreme to another while we're in different situations.
Perhaps interesting to say what you mean by a Cyberloka or the Cyberloka.
Oh yeah.
I sort of with some knowledge of Buddhist terminology, I thought, that's a nice pun kind of thing, and then as I read the book, I saw more and more that actually it's really building on this idea.
Yeah.
Maybe you could introduce that a little bit.
Yeah. So the word is a combination of two bits, cyber and loca. I made it up, by the way. So it's one of the coinages in the book. Cyber, you kind of know, it means technology, basically. But loca is quite a particular word. It's a Sanskrit and Pali word, and it means something like realm or world. But it's not just the objective world out there. It's a world of experience. It's a world which our minds create in interaction with what's going on around us, which is actually like a fundamental Buddhist teaching. I dare even say it's like the fundamental Buddhist teaching is that the mind is at the centre of the world that we create, and the same is true whether we're in a Buddhist centre, whether we're at work, whether we're on the tube, whether we're, as it were, on social media. There's a creation of a world of experience that's taking place there, and insofar as we're aware of that, we can train our minds so that world is a heaven rather than a hell, let's say.
Mm. Yeah. And in terms of how we, you've got interesting things to say in the book about how we therefore relate to it. So you're naming this particular world of what that we enter when we start to look at our phones or computer screens or whatever. What's the benefit of seeing it in that way as its own distinct realm?
Yeah, it's definitely a device. The main thing I think is that it hopefully makes us conscious of the fact we're stepping over a threshold when we do that. Because I mean, for me, it's just like, okay, I just flick my wrist, and it's like it's not even, it doesn't feel like I'm making a transition, but I am. And so to think of it as a world that I'm entering, and therefore can also leave, or can even have a sense of modifying as I go along. I think that is a helpful way of looking at it. I also think it sort of takes us outside of what I can also see as a narrative around technology, which is a really kind of negative one. I don't know whether you know the Social Dilemma Netflix documentary. Yeah, I mean that Netflix produced a documentary like that. I find it quite ironic, but it's really a diatribe, isn't it, of how bad social media is, and how all these tech companies are out to manipulate us and deploy all kinds of artificial intelligence against our humble human brains. It's like, what can I do in that situation? It feels it feels fatalistic, actually. I'd call that a kind of digital fatalism. It's like the only way out is for either governments to regulate it, or for tech to come along and provide a better way of guarding against it. And I just think, that seems to be based on an idea of the mind, that it's a computer, it's basic input-output system. You have this stimulus, we predictably respond to it. And I just think, there may be some truth in that. I mean, obviously there's some truth in that, because we see the stimulus and we respond, and I think it's disempowering. I think, and probably more than that, it's not true. Our minds do have the capacity. Well, our minds are world creators, and knowing that, actually, we have much more influence over the way the way we relate to our devices, and then what we do on them than is sort of in the background, I think, in the way we talk about it often.
I guess maybe one. I think this is in the book as well, but one potential benefit in sort of looking at that side of things, and this sort of the way that these applications and so on are set up so as to capture our attention and so on.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of that can be to sort of know what we're up against and then be able to prepare ourselves.
Totally.
So that creates a bit of attention, doesn't it, as well, of like, how do we both respond to a difficult new realm that we're finding ourselves in, and also to not feel that it's only up to the realm and those who create it to solve the problem for us. Yeah. How do you sort of I don't know if I've got a clear question in my head.
It sounds like an interesting point anyway. So gosh. Yeah, well, I think we're working it out, aren't we? And that's why the way I'm writing the book is very much me talking about my personal experience of mostly getting it wrong, if I'm honest. It's almost like one schoolboy error, if you like, after another in how not to relate to technology. And I offer that by way of just giving you a chance, giving the reader a chance to reflect. Okay, well, how are things going right? How are they going wrong in my own relation to this? Because it's not what we're talking about is not going to be solved by a 180-page book written by me. It's insofar as there's a solution, it's going to be something we arrive at much more collectively, and that requires all of us to be just reflecting on that tension.
You're saying it's not. I think your key point is that it's not just something that is going to be solved out there by the system and systemic changes, although some of those would be very helpful.
Welcome, yeah.
But in a way, that's quite radical, and it's the sort of Buddhist position. It's quite radical to say there are things that we can do that we're not defined by that.
Yeah.
And all of those things are creative responses to this new situation. And you've got in the book sort of particularly explores three sort of areas of this that actually I think open up us up to think about the whole thing. You mentioned it's just a brief survey of some things, but actually it manages to be very broad within that. So it'd be good to talk a little bit about those different areas. And the first one of them, you have this word that you introduce. I don't know whether you've coined it as well or not.
I thought I did, but I didn't.
Okay. That's disappointing. Well, you coined a few, so you're right. This word hyper-availability, which I thought was a very helpful way of looking at it. And you contrasted that with depth.
Yeah. So
maybe you can just introduce those two terms, hyper-availability and depth, and we can talk about.
I'm not sure it really is a contrast, actually. So it's more like hyper-availability just is the situation when it comes to information. Yeah. We want to find out something, and it's just really easy because it's all there and it's almost instantly available. And it's not just like a little bit's there. It's like almost everything is there. Almost all the wisdom teachings of humanity exist on the internet. Isn't that amazing? and they're downloadable if you know where to find them. Yeah, and there's also a lot of dross, proportionally probably a little bit more dross, certainly more dross. But the hyper availability aspect of it is simply that as a species we've very rapidly gone from a situation where I think I remember someone saying there was more information in a 1990s weekend edition of the New York Times than the average person in 1700 would have encountered in their entire life. Right, so that was like 1990s. Yeah, can you remember the 1990s? Right, and it's like, and that was print, that was paper, and then there's bookshops, and then, gosh, it's like there's more videos being uploaded every second than I can watch in my lifetime. So this information is radically more available than it has ever been, and that has obvious benefits and obvious drawbacks. And I think possibly what you're saying with the contrast is if we don't approach that kind of element of the Cyberloka intelligently, we do just sort of dissipate our attention. We spread ourselves very thinly, very shallowly over a lot of content, and even if it's good stuff, it doesn't sink in.
It's the YouTube model, isn't it? You bounce from this video, you might like this one as
next.
well, that's completely unrelated in topic, but that you might actually quite like. Knock around between them. Yeah. One thing I thought was interesting was, which you've just touched on, is how that relates to not just cat videos, but to the Dharma, to trying to really find out what life's really about. Yeah. And obviously that's created lots of opportunities. I mean, we've here at London Buddhist Centre, particularly over the pandemic, really started reaching out much more. We're able to run online retreats with people from different continents, etc. That creates amazing opportunities. We're doing it right now. So somebody might be watching this as one of the first things they've investigated about Buddhism at some point on YouTube, and that's clearly a great opportunity. But how does that person who's just making those first steps to kind of find out about these things, take that towards the depth that they need if it's going to really impact their lives?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think it's hard to do that independently of people. So kind of live people that you can ask and just bend their ear for hours at a time if necessary. I was completely at sea, even back in the early noughties with this, because there were so many different kind of approaches and ideas circulating around that I had access to. Actually, I think what I really needed at that point was somebody to say, look, just try this for now. Just have a go at this for now. This is a decent book, or this is a decent video. Just stick with this for the time being, and ask me some questions about it. Try it out and ask me some questions. So I think it's like if one has found a community or people with whom one can engage in those kind of discussions, yes, then there is a potential to make, I think, quite good use of those resources. Without that, you need to be hyper disciplined to be able to find any way through it. It's really hard.
And it seems with this area of sort of sifting all this information, you mentioned the book's very practical as well. There's lots of sort of, particularly you just use examples from your own life and things that you've, quite ingenious sometimes, things that you've done to counter this. And a lot of your suggestions in relation to dealing with all this information is basically making, in some ways, going against convenience and going against what the kind of drift of culture is as well. For example, you talk about one of the most extreme examples is trying not to follow a trend until it's been going for 10 years, which could slow things down a little bit for people, and that's and things like deliberately choosing to pay for something, in a way, putting sort of blocks in the way of the ease of this all. Do you think? What would you? Do we need to kind of work against? Do we need to sort of put blocks in a way? Do we need to work against this situation?
Yeah, well, I think if we don't, then we'll just be at the mercy of whoever sends us the next bit of clickbait. It's almost as serious as that, I think. So I'm not sure I necessarily see it as blocks, more as funnels or channels. I noticed David Mitra's at the back, and one of the things that I really, lots of things I appreciate about David Mitra, but at one point I asked him, because I knew he was so well read, I asked him for a reading list of classic literature, and he sent me it. It's like 4 pages. This is the author. This is the first book I'd recommend. This is the one I like. This is the one Bhante Sangharakshita recommended to me. Invaluable. So having someone more experienced than me to, and I think the same probably goes for the internet more broadly, like having someone who's more experienced than me who can kind of do a bit of sifting for me. It's not so much a block as like, I feel I can more strongly put my energy towards this now.
And then it's very easy to get hold of those books, for example.
Yeah, massively. Or talk or whatever.
Yeah. Brilliant. And then the middle chapter of your book is all about pornography.
Yeah.
And I sort of felt when we did our course, we said it was a 6-week course, and about the 4 weeks in, I sort of felt I need to mention this, because I knew that for lots of people that would be something that they were working with in trying to work out their own digital lives.
Yeah.
And I found that experience of sitting there in this room and talking about porn kind of terrifying. And partly it's just, it doesn't seem to be done. It's like Fight Club, isn't it? It's like the first rule of porn is that you do not talk about porn, and the second rule is the same. I just, in a way, where you've talked very personally about it and really explored the issues involved in a very balanced way, how have you found, writing about it, but also increasingly having conversations, especially public ones, about porn?
Exciting. It is. It's breaking a taboo, isn't it? It's breaking a taboo, and it's one of those things that, like, if Buddhism is going to have any influence on your life, it needs to have an influence on the whole of your life. There can't just be a kind of private screen time me that doesn't wear a kesa, and sort of does whatever he likes on the internet. It has to find ways of entering into conversation with those elements. So in a way, I wish more people would talk to me about it. I noticed there's a kind of reticence. I don't know why. There's a kind of reticence around bringing it up with me. But you might have been the first person to use the word pornography in the London Buddhist Centre Shrine. Who knows? But it's it is something that because it affects a lot of people. It's hugely contentious, and I do go into the other regarding as well as the self-regarding aspect of it in the book. We need to be talking intelligently about it. So I'm looking forward to more conversations. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say as well on it. What you want to talk about it.
Well, I guess one of the things, largely what I noticed was just how, in a way, relieved people seemed to be able to talk about it. I think you told me this when we spoke about it a while ago, and which I cited at the time, which I think is very funny. There being this Canadian study who'd and she looked into. She was trying to do a study about the effects of pornography on young men, and in order to do her study, she needed to have a control group of young men who hadn't watched pornography, and she couldn't find one.
The study failed.
Which I think it's funny, isn't it? But it's telling. It's clearly for many people, and it's not just men either, but for many people, but probably more prevalent. Some of the issues with that are probably more prevalent or stronger, or perhaps in general for men. But it's clearly an issue. It's clearly an issue for people.
Yeah.
And you mentioned briefly this thing of the focus being on this focus between the other regarding and the self-regarding. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
Well, so I think quite rightly, a lot of the conversations that one can have about pornography, particularly the ethics of pornography, centre around the effects on people producing it, the actors, actresses involved in it, the societal norms that it propounds as well, the kind of values behind it, and of course that's relevant stuff. That is an aspect of ethics that we need to take into account. But I think one of the hazards of that being the go-to is that there are people who, like me in my early 20s, were struggling with quite compulsive watching of porn, and even just the idea of trying to raise it with someone, I felt quite scared that I'd be labelled a misogynist. I'd be basically sort of taken to the cleaners, ethically speaking, and so that really prevented me from being able to just sort of understand what was going on for me at the time, and find a swifter way through it. There are these two aspects of the ethics of pornography that we need to simultaneously hold in mind, and particularly I emphasise the user side of things, because that is where my experience lies.
And what would what is if this is such an issue for people, what is a Buddhist response to it? To somebody who's particularly somebody who's struggling with that, say what's a way out?
Well, I think I didn't do this. So in my own story, the only reason why I stopped watching porn was because I went back to the university network that I was a part of before. So I had a year out, a free abandon of broadband porn. And when I got back, I went back to university accommodation. It's like I cannot be seen or known to be downloading this stuff, I was just kind of scared of the repercussions of that. I don't know what would have happened. Probably lots of people do that anyway. But the network administrator was pretty hot on that. So what would have really helped me at the time would have been actually able to have a sensible conversation with someone about it. The friends with whom I would have talked about it at the time, or I would have talked about porn with, it was all like kind of laddie for, kind of that sort of level of conversation. It wasn't capable of having a sort of sensitive, I'm struggling with this. Increasingly, I don't want to tell the whole of my story in relation to this, but I went through a long period of time when I didn't watch any pornography at all, and it was only when I was starting to train for ordination that I started bringing this up in conversation with people, and there were wiser people, sort of older men often, who could give me some suggestions about it, or could kind of help me to reconnect with the side of me that I'd largely alienated myself from.
Great. And so that's, in a way, I wonder whether there's something else to be gained from this story of you moving back in and just not being able to access it. Yeah. I think I completely agree that the main thing is being able to talk about it, breaking the taboo, and being able to help one another with it. But it seems like there's all sorts of other things people sort of try and go through phases of being able to not watch it at all, and then it sort of breaks and so on. But even one thing that when I was stopping watching pornography was to actively block make it difficult and use computer programs on my computer so that it'd be very difficult to do that, which is just enough to make me, I'm sure I could find some clever way of getting around it if I wanted to, but it's enough of a sort of barrier to mean that when I'm tired and grumpy, it's not sort of it's not easily accessible. Do you think there's a role for that kind of? Maybe this is slightly where we sort of differ in approach, and I'm interested what you think about it. But do you think there's a role for this kind of more active sort of like taking a more active stance against the platform and its ease.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do that all the time. I stole some ideas from your course, the email that went around, and some of the ideas off of that. I think if we can modify, like YouTube is so much better for me now that I've just got the search. I've blocked almost everything. There is no up next. Nothing comes next. There's just what I search for, and then the kind of the whatever that comes up in the search bar. So I think use that stuff. That's fantastic. And I think the thing that strikes me about what you're saying is that if you can introduce something that just makes you kind of think, oh yeah, do I want to do this? Do I want to go down this avenue again? Even just that stops that, momentarily stops that trajectory. Yeah, that will help. That will help.
My sense, I guess, is that it's like a starting point. Particularly, it's like being able to there's this kind of constant barrage of availability, and being able just to start to put the brakes on it, even just by we go on retreat and we turn our phones off and we just have an experience of not being in that realm. So that's the first kind of more kind of if you like course sort of working against the thing, and then out of that there's all the in order for that to sustain, it seems like you need a bigger vision, and you need something much more something that goes deeper, basically, that involves relationship with others.
I think if it's sort of abstinence or nothing, I think it's there needs to be a positive vision that we're moving towards. I think that's not that I know very much about addiction, but I think that's a general sort of suggestion for overcoming any kind of addiction, that there's like a good life that you're wanting to move towards, and this is helping in that way.
In relation to this, you particularly talk about pleasure, which is and the issue being looking for better pleasure. How have you done that in your life?
I'm not sure Buddhists sort of sell this very well, but it is it's a path of pleasure. The Buddhist life, or the Buddhist path, is a path of increasing pleasure. At least that's my experience, and that's kind of the way the Buddha talks about it as well. I don't know why we don't emphasise it so much. Maybe we do at the LBC, I don't know. But so often when I think of the Buddha jewel, or like what the Buddha stands for, it's like the best kind of pleasure that a human being can experience. And when I say the best, I mean the most sustained, the most satisfying kind of pleasure, the most sort of whole kind of pleasure. I just find it where you can, whether that's in I do Tai Chi, martial arts. I find it there. I find it in running. I find it in reading literature. I find it in listening to music. I find it in talking to my friends. Like, there's loads and loads of. I mean, you will know this. In meditation, one kind of develops a taste for the subtler kinds of pleasure as well. I just think, there's no prohibition on pleasure. You may be glad to know that. If anything, there's an encouragement of better kinds of pleasure, and seeking them out. It's like there's loads you can get.
And that's much more motivating than a don't do that, naughty, don't talk about it either kind of thing.
Yeah, you're a very bad boy. Sthiramanas.
That's not very motivating, is it? I've never been told that. So then let's talk about the last section, which in a way is the longest, and I think the sort of the crown jewel of the book, really. I particularly love the whole thing is called the Facebook Sutta, and it's a little-known sutta from the Pali Canon, in which the Buddha has quite a lot to say about the particular issues of social media and communication online. You say in a footnote that in recent times, a scholarly consensus has emerged that this sutta is a later interpolation. In other words, I made it up.
I made it up. Yeah. Later interpolation. That's what scholars would say about it. Yeah. Apocryphal sutta or something like that.
And but what it enables you to do is to really, basically in the style of the Buddha's early teaching, or how we've received it, build up a step-by-step analysis of what's going on and what are the different points that we can intervene in the creation of all the issues that can come in terms of misinformation and disharmony and even violence and so on that can come out of these forums. There's loads that could be said about what the issues are. One thing that particularly struck me was you talked a few times about the Cyberloka being a realm of literalism. So literalism being a particular issue in this. I wonder if you could say a bit more what you mean by that.
Yeah, well, it often, particularly in sort of little blue text boxes you just have text, don't you? You alluded to this earlier. It's like, so you have text and there's not just, well, there's a person and there's a background and there's a sort of history behind all of that, and all we get is this, whatever, 160 characters or with the occasional emoji, for seasoning. So it's a realm of literalism, because what we tend to do is just read it on the face of it. We read what somebody sends us just in its literal form. The whatever the first meaning of the term is that's there. But there's all kinds of nuance and all kinds of ways that people use words. I mean, like over dinner tonight, we were talking about the word couple, weren't we? I'll see you in a couple of days, and what that means, and it can be gotten wrong. So it's like there's a if we only have the text, it does require quite an active imagination to start to see behind that, to imagine the person there, and to imagine that there might be a different meaning even to what they're saying. Often we tend to interpret things more negatively than they're intended. I mean, psychologists tell us that. Yeah.
How does that How does that play out then? If you've got this simple, on a micro level, it's harder to read the precise meaning behind that bit of text. How does that what does that turn into if left unchecked?
Well, I guess it's just multiple people doing that to each other, and the interpretation's getting more and more negative, probably. It's not. I just imagine the footnotes to that one. It's like there's a huge number of examples we could draw on for that. Sure, of our own personal experience and seeing it play out in broader political ways as well. Yeah.
And one of the things that's striking about this is how many different sort of alternative options that you seem to provide, that we don't need to, in a way you're saying we don't need to be stuck with this form, this way of, somebody's written a comment under a post on whatever platform and I therefore need to respond in kind.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we might consider as just a flavour of some of the alternatives that we might consider in terms of how we communicate with those people?
Yeah, well, I think you probably will know. So it's the more real time it is, the better. If you can get tone of voice in there, if you can see the person's body language, their face, anything like that, it is. It's like the lazy thing to do is just to reply in the medium that you receive it in, and if there is something kind of not working in our communication, we've got to bump it up a level. We've got to seek out something of what I describe as a higher fidelity medium. And anthropologists have looked at this. They've looked at this was quite a while ago, but they've looked at the satisfaction that people get from communicating through different media. And the more face to face it is, the more real time. All of that helps, because a lot of it comes out of ambiguities or not really clocking where someone else is coming from. And if you can ask that question, are you okay today, Sthiramanas? Is everything all right? If you send it in a text form, it comes across as really sarcastic and accusatory. Are you okay? But if I can ask you, you don't seem quite yourself. That's sort of. Do you see what I mean? It means then that well, there's a human being. There's not just a thumbnail.
Mm.
Yeah.
I thought one particularly creative suggestion you had was in a situation where you've got a debate, say on an online forum, being like, hey, why don't we could do a video call and record it and post that,
Yeah.
and we could discuss our views, go back and forth, and it's like, look, there are vastly more creative options that are there for us if we can.
Yeah.
So in a way, it feels like this is where a lot of my experience has been like, oh, these are some of the effects of spending all this time on social media. I think for most people, probably we do need to find a way to spend less time on that and remove some of the negatives, etc. But you've got a very positive vision for how we might use these platforms. So maybe you can say something about why we shouldn't just give up on social media as a bad lot.
Well, because a lot of people use them. Probably most of us use them, and I think if like me, you feel like you've got something of value to offer other people, then I think you need to there's a strong incentive to learn how to use them in order to communicate that. I think there's loads more we could do as Buddhists, loads more, and I'm I kind of know that I don't necessarily have all the ideas, but I really think that just by virtue of the fact that so many people use them, it is important for us to know how to use them well and exemplify that. Yeah. But I think more broadly, it's like so there is opportunity for connection on these forums. There is opportunity for people to be encountering something genuinely meaningful. I think there's also opportunity for people to learn. If that wisdom is available there too. And I think there's even some pleasure to be had. Yeah. So I think my take is definitely not one of you need to be recycling your smartphone or locking it away or whatever. There are times to be away from it. Like I'm going to be going on a retreat in a few weeks, and I will not be looking at my phone. It'll be in my bag, and that'll be really good for me. I'll look forward to that. And also, I think the potential here is so strong that we need to learn how to use them intelligently. And I think we can. I don't think it's that far away, actually.
Great. I wonder if, before we wrap up, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask Prajnaketu. We probably have time for a couple of questions.
It's not a question, but I'm like, because you mentioned your way, I think your way is Padmasambhava's way. Because I believe if internet existed, or technology during when Buddha was alive, or when Padmasambhava was alive, it would have been one of his demons. And of course, he doesn't say kill the demon or resist it. It says he what he does with his demons is make them work for him. So I think that is what you have been mentioning. I was like, oh my gosh, that would have been one of my Padmasambhava's demons.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, if you can maintain that mythic perspective while you're on your phone, amazing. Yeah.
No, but we don't like
no, and I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean, really, I really believe that. Yeah. I talk in the book about the Bodhisattva ideal, and somebody who really is interested in the welfare of all beings has got to encounter all beings and has got to know the ways to speak their language, got to engage them. So I when I said my way, I didn't mean that in a kind of proprietary way. It's more like this is the way that I've articulated given what my teachers have said and what their teachers have said, going back to the Buddha. But I think it does stand in contrast to a lot of the discourse around social media and technology. Yeah.
Any more?
I wonder if you can say any more about, you kind of touched on this a little bit when you were talking about kind of discovering about the Dharma through kind of YouTube and stuff like that. Like, obviously there are positive aspects to the technology. Yeah. I wonder if you can say any more about, I suppose it does become a rabbit hole, doesn't it? Even though it's, it might be something interesting, and it might be something even useful. I think I'm at a place where I struggle with that because I want to learn more and I want to understand and try and find the meaning of life, as you were saying. And obviously, we probably can't find the meaning of life at all, and particularly not on media. So I think it's just like an interesting question to maybe dive deeper into, if you can say any more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I do in the book, which is a kind of cop-out answer. Yeah. I think the main thing I would say is try to milk as much as you can from as little as you can. So the tendency is to think, oh yeah, the London Buddhist Centre is putting out I don't know how many videos a week. I will watch all of them, and I'll watch the back catalogue, and I'm sure there's loads you can get from that. But even just one talk, there can be an enormous amount in that. I've been on the receiving end of somebody who's listened to something I've said multiple times and quoted it back to me, and it's changed them to do that for the better. And so they've it's sunk in, and I think that's the beyond the initial contact with something. That's the next stage is creating conditions so that the extremely valuable things you are hearing, seeing, actually have a chance to become who you are, and that takes time. It takes, I think, it takes time of doing nothing around it, before and after. One of the things I say in the book is I like to do things ritualistically. So if I'm listening to a piece of music, there's a whole kind of set of secular rituals I go through. Dimming the lights, putting on the headphones, cup of tea, all that kind of thing, because it establishes me in a mode which is receptive to what I'm going to be encountering, and then afterwards giving it time to sink in. So that would be my strong suggestion with whatever you see, because everything the London Buddhist Centre is putting out is really high quality. Actually, you're very, very lucky to be meeting this place. Give it, honour it. Give it time to allow it to make its mark.
Right.
Very helpful, thank you.
I think that's a good point to end on, and I think, in a way, I think this book creates the opportunity for that, partly in the way that you've written it. There's lots of questions for reflection and things that you could either talk to other people about, or just to really absorb, and you encourage people to spend longer reflecting on the material in the book than actually reading it. And I think that in terms of a starting point, particularly in reflecting on this area, there's an enormous amount of depth there that can be dived into, and in doing so, I think it opens up quite a lot. It opens up a lot about a lot of the Buddhist tradition in itself. It's a window through being applied. It's a window into the essence of what the Buddha was communicating as well, which is quite a feat. And so I really want to encourage people to buy copies and read it slowly. Yeah. Slowly. We've got plenty outside, and Prajnaketu will kindly sign books afterwards as well. And but mainly I just really want to thank you for coming here tonight on this dark winter evening, and I've really enjoyed talking to you about the book. So let's put our hands together and thank Prajnaketu. Great, good.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so if you could help us put mats and cushions away, that'd be brilliant. And